Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, we are live. Great. Okay, so I started out as a product design engineer. I was the lead product designer on Downey Hillis's Connection Machine, the first commercial AI supercomputer, and in 1989, also the fastest supercomputer in the world. 30 years after its launch, I got this one into the Museum of Modern Art by showing them my research that showed that Google's hardware and software was essentially substantially taken over from Downey Hillis's two companies, Thinking Machine and MetaWeb. And also that, as a friend of mine who was Steve Jobs' right hand for years told me, years after, when my Connection Machine came out, he said to her, Joanna Hoffman, find the designer of that machine. I want them to design my next computer. And if you look at Steve Jobs' designs before and after, there's a huge difference in his design aesthetic. So I wanted, however, to go into media art, and in the 90s I started working as a creative director and producer of VR at the company Worlds Incorporated, creating the first MetaWeb for the metaverse for children, working together with the filmmaker Steven Spielberg, who was at that point chair of the Starbright Foundation, a foundation that works to improve the life of chronically and seriously ill children. So the doctors told us from the start, these kids are already nauseous, they're already hooked up to machines, they don't need to have one of these 90s huge VR headsets on their head, making them even more sick. So we just ran the virtual world on monitors in playrooms and hospitals. The kids got out of their beds, came into small groups to play in front of these monitors, and of course also look for E.T. because they knew Steven Spielberg was always behind E.T. when he showed up. So when I took this idea when I started making my own virtual worlds as artworks, that I really wanted to bring VR not as an isolating experience for a single user, but for a group experience that would bring people together and chose, therefore, to show them as large two-dimensional projections on very large screens run by a very simple joystick. This first piece, Beyond Manzanar, was done together with Zara Hushmand, who is also at Worlds at that time. And the Manzanar internment camp was the first of over 10 internment camps in the USA in World War II, where in each of these over 10 camps, 10,000 men, women, children, elderly, orphans were torn out of their day-to-day existence, and within 3 days had to enter these prison camps for the duration of the war. So this historic layer of Manzanar and the Japanese-American story, we overlaid with a threat to Iranian Americans that had come during the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979 and 80 to intern all Iranian Americans like we did to the Japanese Americans, quote unquote. And the protests from the Japanese Americans were instrumental in preventing this from happening. At this point, there were very little, we finished this piece in 2000, and at that point there were very few narrative, large virtual worlds. We had to develop our own theory. So we played with ideas from theater. Zara was a theater director, and found it was very important for us to alternate these negative spaces with positive spaces so that you don't just, get everyone depressed and then they leave because they can walk out at any point when you show this in a gallery. So here, so we included paradise gardens like the Japanese Americans really did build in Manzanar, and imaginary paradise gardens in the Iranian style, because this landscape looks exactly like Iran. I did two other large virtual reality pieces with this technology. I'll just show you briefly some of the Berlin Wall piece, where we allowed you to, in a small section of Berlin, walk along the wall on the west side, where it was the largest graffiti artwork in the world. But if you did the same thing in the east side and got too close to the wall, you would be accosted, arrested, and interrogated. All of these pieces can be shown in stereo. My first two were largely, so to speak, 2.5D, but I do show the Berlin Wall piece in stereo headsets. I'm also creating new pieces, a series of works that use Lewis structures, these chemical depictions of the atomic structure of molecules, to show the invisible gases that are so important for life on this planet. But for us, we cannot tell a CO2 molecule from an O2 molecule if it was staring us in the face. So I visualize these, and in Atmosphäre, take you on a deep time journey through the changing nature of the atmosphere. In a very similar piece done as a mixed reality, Elemental Space, it's still a work in progress, I'm just finishing it up. There are 4 bowls with each of the 4 elements, earth, fire, water, air. And holding one of these bowls in your hand releases that into the virtual world, and that changes the world around you. And in this piece, I'm concentrating on the elements that seem to be necessary for the evolution of life on the planet. I've just found out I can talk with the people in the observatory in Munich, and they'll double check all of my science here, and I hope to bring this out in the next year. So let's move forward. This one is still in progress. Let's jump back in time to 2010, when AWE was founded and when I had my first augmented reality artwork. Friends of mine, Mark Skwarek and Sander Wienhof, who had already been working with a very primitive mobile AR at that time, sent out a message to their friends: we're going to invade MoMA. They don't know about it. They can't stop us. Send us your work, we'll put it up. So there was a flash mob there. I couldn't go, but I could send them my piece. My first artwork in AR was called the Art Critic Face Matrix, my own distorted face that seems to be screaming, AR will never be art, give it up, forget it. But it turns out that since this was this guerrilla intervention was part of a public festival, then MoMA actually did find out about it and tweeted it, which of course was the best publicity we could ask for as artists. So we got together as the group Manifest.AR and did a bunch of interventions together. Mark again called out the next year for AR Occupy Wall Street. You might remember in 2007, 2008, there was a financial crash worldwide. The banks were saved, and people's entire savings were lost. So there was a huge amount of popular anger at the stock exchange, at the banks. There were protests in the New York Stock Exchange. Of course, then the police boarded it up. You couldn't protest there. So we set AR protests there. This is mine, Rain of Gold, animated stream of gold coins falling from above that I set so it could be used in the whole world. Here, for instance, in Sydney, Australia, where another one of our group members were and sent me these images. So I've been using AR as sort of a visual meme that can be used anywhere in the world to create protest images. Here's a piece. Oh, it's louder than I thought. Sorry. Ben Livner-Weitzman, who's in the audience here, commissioned this for the 175th anniversary of the first attempt to bring democracy to Germany. It failed. And to commemorate this piece, we have silver coins showing the real coins of the time, showing the heads of the rulers that were then deposed in these revolutions. You click on those coins and they explode and turn into the documents of the first draft constitution. But what really happened, and what happens in our AR, is that after a while, gold coins start falling down from the King of Prussia and from the Emperor of Austria. And these two countries were rich enough, they sent in their their armies and quelled all of the revolutions. And that was the end of democracy until after total annihilation and destruction in World War II. So on a slightly different note, a more intimate note, shall we say, I have a piece in Munich that actually has a plaque that says, scan this QR code, and then you will see that the statue of Juliet, Capulet, known from Romeo and Juliet, is surrounded by a cloud of her avatars. Now, the statue is rubbed by visitors on the right breast, and so this 13-year-old is publicly groped basically every day in Munich and has caused a certain amount of controversy. And as part of the Make Us Visible Virtual Monuments project started by Anne Wichmann and a number of other women, I've surrounded her, Juliet, with body-positive avatars showing Viking shield maidens and showing Amazons, fighters who were said to bare their breasts when they went into war, showing their breasts as a sign of strength and not of submission, trying to change our mindsets. So I have a lot of pieces that deal with ecology. Here's a piece commissioned by the Smithsonian Institution for their 175th anniversary. Rewild takes the idea of turning the city back to nature. For instance, you might know that the monarch butterfly has caterpillars that can only survive by eating the leaves of one plant, the milkweed. The milkweed is not commercially interesting to us humans, therefore we eradicate it, and then we realize we are eradicating the monarch butterfly. So here I'm using AR to visualize how plants could fill inside the buildings, outside the buildings, and take you to sort of an insect's eye view, for instance, of other types of bees beyond the honeybees. Well, we like the honeybees because they create honey for us. They're useful for us. But there's thousands of other insects and wild bees that fill niches that the honeybee cannot. And when we just support the honeybees, they push out all of the other pollinators. And when we take down all of our dead plants, we also destroy a habitat that helps those insects survive the winter. Here's a piece that was a commission from Roche Pharmaceutical in Basel. So I took I looked at their medicines because I figured the earliest medicines were derived directly from plants. And sure enough, if you click on these bottles, then the plants emerge out of the bottles. And there's two that are heart medications, the foxglove and the yellow flowers, and they beat with a heartbeat. And then opium, of course, was used as a painkiller, so the heads of the opium pods say Om and float up to the sky, and the castor plant, which is a laxative, shoots its little beans into the atmosphere. And here's a piece that's just finished in Munich. It should open next year in Hamburg, Waldwandel Forex Flux. We showed it in the Kunsthalle in Munich and asked them to provide iPads so that people can look at the entire installation, but they're very important. We wanted to actually have a huge wall projection, but they gave us this little monitor instead. But at least there, when you walk into the space, you instantly see yourself in the virtual world. You know that there is something else in that space and are encouraged to pick up the iPads or download the app on your own smartphone. This was, we worked together with the Bavarian Forestries to look at climate change and how it's affecting the forest in Bavaria. The spruce has been a very important plant for them to grow wood, but it cannot take the heat, it cannot take the dryness, and actually both these interesting flowers, they're actually proto-flowers before real flowers were evolved, and then the pollen storms that these will send out, blanketing upper Bavaria with this green-yellow pollen, are signs that of distress from the tree, that it is actually dying. So of course they're trying to get away from monoculture and plant a huge mixture of trees, and for one thing, bring back things like the Elsbeere, wild service tree in English, which actually produces the most important hardwood in all of Europe, but also has these huge blossoms that provide rich nourishment for a wide variety of pollinators. And again, instead of the omnipresent honeybee, we show the rose chafer beetle, which is also a very vigorous pollinator and also creates mulch by chewing up all of the dead leaves. So again, filling a niche that the honeybee cannot fill. We have a range of works on plastics in oceans. This was a commission from the Whitney Museum in 2018 to cover their terrace with a AR artwork. So we created this beautiful, bright, colorful coral reef that that when you look more carefully at it, is actually composed of garbage. So there's this 1-2 effect where people say, oh, this is really cool. And they say, oh my God, I'm surrounded by garbage. And actually, when it's running at the Whitney, over the course of the day, the more people who download it, the more the corals bleach. So again, each person is not radically responsible for a huge change, but you see in the masses that we are destroying the planet. Of course, with AR, when you stand in front of the AR camera, you are part of the artwork. So in Evolution of Fish, another piece dealing with plastics in the ocean, we projected on these 2-story houses, and you can actually move the iPad to steer the fish. And the more you steer the fish, the more they turn into plastics. But people were so excited about having their own image taken that there was a huge line around the block, and everyone just stood for their pictures and then ran away to post them. So we realized that we should really use this aspect of AR artworks to spread out our message in a stealth mode. So here we are in Meet Digital Cultural Center. We had a 15 projection video mapping, and we said, well, we'd like to have actually one smartphone driving each projector, and they said, oh, we don't have the money, we'll give you 2 iPads. So a lot of it is pre-rendered video, but we have these 2 sections where there's live iPads feeding an AR that's mapped into this seamlessly into this whole projection. People playing with their image, playing with the idea of being underwater, surrounded by plastic, making photographs, making videos, making TikTok videos, and each time they post, enter the plasticine, here I am swimming in the plastic. So this is a great way to get out the message. Of course, in your own smartphone, this is what it would look like, and I am really excited that the VR glasses are now about to do the color pass-through that would enable us to have people able to walk around what seems to be the empty space and see it full of plastic. And this is the last one I'll show. This is at the AR Biennale in Düsseldorf, ending this Sunday. And here you also see individual pieces of plastic falling from above. If you click on them, each one grows into a complicated generative coral shape. And again, I'm surrounding you with plastic, trying to give you a little bit of empathy for what we are doing to the denizens of our ocean. So thank you, and I think we have time for questions.
Thank you very much, Tamiko, for guiding us through this journey, right? And seeing you excited about what's going to happen when now mixed reality are going to be more streamlined, and we can immerse literally people in a message, right? It's not necessarily, that doesn't have to be plastic at that point, but in a message, in a story. Right. So, are there any questions from the audience? Yes, microphone is coming. Here we go.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your work. It was really nice. I was actually a bit curious to have an advice about one of your work. I think it was, I forget the piece of it, but it was the one that the more people view, the more it bleeds.
Right.
How did you do that?
Well, there's a server-side aspect of course. So you know, every time someone downloads the app, then we register that and say, okay, you know, bleach it more. So it's really simply the number of downloads per day, and then we reset that in the next morning, and then start it again.
Okay, so they're more like a web-based. So they're more application experience.
Yeah, you have the app on your phone, but the content is all downloaded from the server. This is what we do to avoid having like an app download that's like 350 megabytes. So we have 35 megabytes in our app, and then we're using Unity asset bundles to say, okay, you're in front of the Whitney, you download the content just for the Whitney. You're in the Kunsthalle in Munich, download just the content for Waldwandel in Kunsthalle. So we always have this server connection.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other question? Oh, we have another question there.
Hi, thank you so much for a very interesting lecture. And I want to ask you if you can somehow measure if people change their mind or change their thoughts after the social projects.
You know, if that's an aspect, there's two things I don't like doing. One is finances, and the other is statistics. If anyone wants to work with me on that, I would love to do it. I only have stories from friends that for instance, evolution of fish I showed in a small gallery in Munich, and asked friends to basically save up the plastic that just naturally came into their houses during a month before, and bring it and wash it, please, and then bring it in and help me pin it on the walls and the ceiling. And a lot of my friends came in and said, you know, we only shop at natural food stores. And I didn't realize almost everything we buy there is wrapped in plastic. So that was an aha moment. And then another friend, came in and saw one of our plastic garbage installations and says, you know, you really got me thinking. And now I've started like saving the little, recycling the little tin cups that the candles come in. So I only have these sorts of stories. But if anyone wants to work with me on something, please. Like I said, Hamburg in October of next year would be, for instance, an opportunity when the Waldwandel Forest Flux piece is shown in Hamburg.
Thank you so much.
Any other question? Please.
Thank you, Tamiko. That was great. I just have a question about because you've worked with this technology for so long, if you've really noticed a significant change in users' expectations as the technology has evolved, and whether you think that's impacted how storytelling for you works.
Yes, in ways that are, of course, positive and negative. One thing is that in 2010, when most of us started, interactivity was difficult. It was also difficult to do more than maybe like 5 megabytes of content. Now there's, just as a data point, the connection machine supercomputer was in 1989 the fastest supercomputer, and I took a look at how many gigaflops it did. It's about as powerful as an iPhone 5. So we do walk around with supercomputers in our pockets, and we should be aware of that. And that's what enables then also, you can do visual effects that are really amazing. You can have enormous number of polygons. You can have a lot of interaction, and the interactivity, I think, is an important thing that's much easier to do now than it was, for instance, like 13 years ago. But one problem that I see is that people tend to think, creators tend to think in certain categories. They think in terms of, here's an image that I put in 3D space. Here's an object that I put in 3D space. Or if they have a more complicated scenario, it's a game, and you need to do something. I do a lot of work in cities, on sidewalks, where if you're sitting there playing a game on a sidewalk and people are trying to get past you, and their cars may be like turning in and out, you're not going to make a lot of friends. So I always say, you have to think about the fact that with AR, you always have a context. Every single AR is site-specific. It's site-specific to that site where you are standing right now looking at it. And if that doesn't fit, then you might be causing problems for people around you, for your environment, or for yourself if you get run over. And then also maybe it doesn't fit. Maybe your piece doesn't fit everywhere. So maybe it should only be shown at certain places. And if we're expanding into not only 3 but 4 dimensions, and it's real and virtual, then how interesting is it to always have a screen in front of you? And I realize that people are trying to make money, and companies that do a lot of screens, put a lot of screens into AR. But for me personally, it's not interesting. For me, it's the interaction between the 3D virtual world and the 3D real world and your 3D virtual content. And that, to me, is where AI is interesting. The question of whether or not it makes money and whether you can make more money by putting your Windows screens in a space is something that I, as an artist, have made a personal decision a long time ago not to deal with. So it's a complicated answer, but I hope that addresses some of your question.
Thank you very, very much. Let's give another round of applause for guiding us through this.